So this time about 2 years ago, on a random Thursday, I handed in my final uni assignment. And then just like that, 3 years was finished. And I had the mammoth task of deciding what on earth I was supposed to do next. But first, we need to take a few steps back. In my final year of my degree, I got a job in a nursing home and I was the activities coordinator. And I've worked in care homes the whole time during COVID, and I have to say, being the activities coordinator is the most fun job in a care home. There is just no doubt about it for me. I loved planning the activities. I loved being able to enrich their lives. It was a lot of fun, and for a long time I thought that this would be my next step after I graduate. I thought I would just continue in this role, see where it takes me, and then maybe in a year's time figure out my next steps. I feel like this is something a lot of art grads do. They just continue the job they had in uni, do their art part-time, and try and make both things work while still having that creative practice that a lot of us still want to keep. But somewhere along the line, I was browsing jobs and I came across an art teacher job. And bearing in mind that I'd enjoyed the role that I had as an activities coordinator, I thought I like planning activities, I like making people's lives a little bit better perhaps. And so I thought maybe actually I could be an art teacher. Had I worked with children before? No. Had I sworn to myself that I would never step foot in a school again after I finished school? Yes. But the pay was pretty good, and so I figured, how hard could it be? I did some digging and found out I'd need this thing called a PGCE, and so you guessed it, I just applied. And this would mean another year of uni, another 9 grand, possibly down the drain, but unfortunately I have no chill, so I did it anyway. Which brings us back nicely to finishing my degree. I felt pretty burnt out, which I think is really common with a lot of art grads. You spend 3 years constantly creating artistic output, and then all of a sudden it just comes to an abrupt end and you have to try and figure out your identity outside of being an art student at uni. So during this time I thought to myself I would take a break and try and work on some of my other creative endeavours and see where that would take me. And to be honest, during this time it was quite nice to just exist without the pressure of constantly creating things, and I could just create things at my own pace and take a break as and when I needed to. Which brings us back to finishing off my degree. I felt pretty burnt out, which I think is the way a lot of art grads feel. You spend 3 years constantly creating and outputting, and then all of a sudden there's just nothing. You really sort of, for the first time in a long time, become in control of what you're creating and when you're creating. And honestly, it just led to me not really making that much for a little bit. I sort of concentrated on my hobbies, pursuing my other creative ideas rather than making art, because I just felt like I couldn't. I didn't really know what to make art about, and so I just didn't. And instead I spent that time focusing on sort of what the next couple of months would look like instead of what the next couple of years. And honestly, at that time, I felt like that was the best thing I could have done, really. There was just no... It was just so hard to think so far ahead. In that position, yeah, that was the only thing I could really do. Not long after I finished my degree, I quit my job in the care home and I signed up to a teaching assistant agency. I expected this to be sort of in primary schools and stuff, but it actually turned out to be mostly in nurseries, where I spent most of my time cuddling babies, and I decided that that was a good enough test to see if I could work with teenagers all day long, and it's probably for the best if you don't question that logic. In the meantime, I was looking at kind of other jobs. I was looking at office jobs or jobs local to my area, but nothing was really speaking to me, and everything I sort of looked at and tried to apply for, I just didn't really have it that much of an interest in. I did my PGC interview, it came around and I accepted the place, and I did another year at uni. So by the time I finished my degree, I had a little bit of a plan for the next year. I knew I was going to do this PGCE, and if it didn't work out, then I would just pivot and try something else. So I started doing the PGCE. I really enjoyed it. There was lots of ups and downs, but overall it was a really positive experience. But despite this, I was still quite unsure as to whether I was going to be a teacher when I left or what I was going to do. And I was also applying for lots of teaching roles, and I was getting rejected left, right and centre. And so this is kind of around sort of April, May time, the scaries really started to set in, and I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? But fortunately, around this time last year, I got my job. I'm teaching DT now. And if you'd have told me sort of 3 years ago that's what I'd be doing, I would have totally laughed it off. So I guess in terms of like the moral of the story, so to speak, you know, if 10 years ago, 15-year-old me looked at all the things I'd done now and all the twists and turns and the side steps and the forward steps I've had now, I would have laughed myself off totally. I would have been horrified. But you just never really know sort of where you're going to go and how it all feeds into one thing. So I think my advice for you, if you are a grad now or you're going to be a grad next year, is one, just get yourself stuck into something, get a job, go travel, go and throw yourself into your art completely. The decision paralysis is worse than than actually just doing something, and to keep being creative. Obviously, I felt quite burnt out after I graduated, but I kept doing sort of creative hobbies, or I was doing things that were feeding sort of my passions. And then about 6 months after I finished, I then was able to step back into making artwork. So just get stuck into something, keep being creative, and I hope this helps with you if you are graduating this year. Good luck. Thank you for watching.